are joined now by G. Edward Griffin. Sir, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, you don't need any introduction, but you're the best-selling author of The Creature from Jekyll Island. For close to 50 years, you've been exposing the private banking cartel, and I can't think of anybody out there who explains the pressure from above, pressure from below system. People ask me, why would elite bankers, why would they support communists? Why would they support socialists? Why would they support collectivism? And we see MoveOn.org, the White House, all Wall Street financed, Soros financed, pumping millions into co-opting the Occupy Wall Street movement. That's why I'm calling for an Occupy the Fed. And so I want to get your view on that idea, and if you think that's a good one. And then I want to segue into what Carol Quigley and others wrote about, that you made films about, this pressure from above and below. Why do we see so many billionaires supporting collectivism? G. Edward Griffin.
Well, you really raised a good point there, Alex, because there's a tremendous amount of confusion today between having a lot of money and being wealthy and being a capitalist. Those words need to be defined, don't they? Capitalism does not necessarily mean that you're not a socialist. What we have today, let's cut to the chase, is that we have a lot of very wealthy socialists in the world, a lot of very wealthy collectivists. And the old definition of capitalism was more accurate than the new one. The new definition of capitalism is, or a capitalist, is anybody with a lot of money, and doesn't cover it at all. Because the wealthiest people in the world today are not free enterprise capitalists. They're monopoly capitalists. You need to make that distinction. People make their money today in the world not by free enterprise competition, not by producing a better product at a better price, or anything like that. They make their money today by buying politicians and buying political favoritism and sending their lobbyists into the power centers of the legislative power centers of whatever governments there are in the world and getting them to pass special laws that favor them. Money today is made, the great wealth today is made by political maneuvering and favoritism, and that is not capitalism. So when people go out there and they say our crisis today in the banking system proves that capitalism doesn't work, they don't understand any of this at all. They're still thinking that capitalism is the same as wealth. So you're right on target, I think, especially when you want to emphasize that we need to occupy not Wall Street. What is that? Wall Street is a physical location. It's where a lot of brokerage houses are. It's where the banks are centered. But the real problem is the Federal Reserve System. That's the problem. It's a monopoly. It's a cartel that's been given this monopolistic power by Congress. And it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. It's this marriage between corporations and government. That's not capitalism. That is collectivism in its purest form. So when these people say, let's overthrow capitalism, they miss the point, because capitalism has been gone, really totally gone, in the sense of the word that I'm using it, been totally gone since World War II.
Well, that's my point. Exactly, G. Edward. That's what I want you to elaborate on, is that even Ross Perot, who claims he's free market, made the lion's share of his money selling EDS to the government. Exactly. You look at all these big fortunes, it's the monopoly power of government, and one of the clearest examples is Barack Obama and General Electric, the head of his economic council. They, the very day that his new carbon rules went into effect, they were given an exemption, and now they're shutting power plants down all over the country, but General Electric can still operate, and their profits are going way up. I mean, this is so dangerous, and it destroys progress. And then to see the monopoly capitalists using collectivism to destroy their competition, to consolidate power, to see Michael Moore, who's made hundreds of millions of dollars in the so-called free market system, saying capitalism is the problem, not the Federal Reserve. We have a clip of that we played earlier as we went out to break. And he's saying that's the problem. The problem is capitalism. And so people now think monopoly corruption is capitalism, and they're selling them on more collectivism. I mean, isn't that just putting our leg in a bigger bear trap? Because I remember you decades ago talking about this juncture we've now entered, where when the collectivism causes society to implode, the danger is the establishment will use that as an excuse to sell more of the same as the solution, instead of getting back to true freedom. So break that down, and the choice we have between the monopoly capitalist and true freedom.
Well, you've said it so well, Alex. All I can do is go over the same ground, and I think it does need to be repeated over and over again because it's foreign to the ears of most Americans. You don't hear this sort of thing on ABC, CBS, NBC, and all that. The major news outlets continue to spew out the same old propaganda about this is a capitalist system. Well, it's not. It's a collectivist system. There's not much difference anymore between the system in America and the system you find in Red China, or in Cuba, or in what used to be called the old Soviet Union, or Russia. They have different labels, but once you peel off the label and look down underneath, you've got bedrock collectivism everywhere in the world today. And you're quite right when you say that the advocates of collectivism who want more, and more, create a boogeyman. They say capitalism is what's causing all this problem. Let's have more government intervention. Let's have more government control. Let's have more marriage between corporate and state. Let's have these private partnership relationships with the government. You know, all these things. They're advocating, as you say, more of the same poison that's killing the patient. They're advocating that is supposed to be the medicine for him. And the only real solution is, first of all, the American people have to understand this little trick that's being played on them. And then they have to understand, well, what is the alternative? It's something that, you know, we haven't seen in America in the lifetime of any of us living today. You have to go back to the history books to find out what the solution is. People say, well, you don't want to go backwards. Well, moving backwards in time would be moving forward in ideology. It would be moving forward in solutions, because we would be moving forward to the idea of a free market, not in bed with the government. See, the government loves to come in and say, we're going to regulate these industries for you folks, for the benefit of the population. You know, but what really happens is that the regulators get into bed with the corporations that are being regulated, and then they become one and the same. And so under this umbrella of supposedly regulating industry and the banks, among other things, another industry, and supposedly controlling the society on the benefit, for the benefit of the people, they're actually just protecting the corporations under that umbrella. So we've got to get this in our brains, that this is the reality of today. And the only solution to this problem is to go forward to where we were about 80 years ago. I mean that literally. Go forward to where we were 80 or 100 years ago and get the government out of all of these things. Go back to a true free enterprise system where competition is the only thing that will produce the best products, the best service, the lowest prices, the best amount of freedom for the individual. And not that it's without problems, because of course it does have problems, but those problems are minuscule compared to the problems that we have today, which is a result of government control and regulation supposedly to protect the people, when in fact it's to protect the corporations.
Well, very well said. Historically, here's an analogy to be added to what you were talking about going forward to the past. Collectivism, centralized gangs, cartels, letter of marque, all of that goes back thousands of years to the king rats, the strong men, the emperors, all the gladiatorial horrors that and wars that came along with it. Kill and be killed, just a terrible system. The furthest we ever went was the flower of the Renaissance. The greatest extension of it, or the Enlightenment, was 1776, 1789, the American true free market, diverse system. Wasn't perfect because we were still reaching towards more liberty. So it'd be like if I was on a trip to, say, California, and I drove to the California line and then drove back to New Mexico. It wouldn't be that Dallas was closer to California just because I turned back. I had gotten closer to California by driving to the state line, but I turned back. We want to go back to where we were, which was the furthest that we'd basically gone. I mean, that's an analogy off the top of my head, or saying we'd never been to the moon. We need to go back to actually going to the moon, which is the furthest we've gone, because we haven't tried to go forward since then.
Well, I think their point is well taken, Alex. Yeah, we have to go forward, because what we've been doing for the last 80 to 100 years is moving backward in history. We've been going back to the Middle Ages, to the element of serfdom.
By the way, that's what the Club of Rome, as you know, speak to that. They're very conscious about this. They say they want a post-industrial world for the general public, high-tech reservations with the elite and government and corporations, and they say they want us back to a feudal state. I mean, that's an official UN Club of Rome dogma.
Mm-hmm. Well, they're doing very well. They're succeeding. In fact, I'd say we're probably more than halfway there already. And the trouble is, it's incremental, and you get used to it, you know. Every year, we lose a significant amount of our personal liberties, and our children coming up have never heard about much of this stuff. So with the passage of a couple of generations, the new generation in place is perfectly content to be living in a feudalist system because they don't know anything better. They think that's the way it's always been, and they're told, well, you're in America now. This is free enterprise because you're in America, right? This is capitalism, right? Wrong. That's the point, and you and I are in total agreement on that, but I'm afraid the people out there on the streets today, a lot of them don't understand that, and so they're angry, obviously angry, and they're justified in being angry, and they're saying, you know, let's occupy Wall Street. Okay, that's good. Now what? Now we've occupied Wall Street. What are we going to do? I don't know. We'll just occupy Wall Street and show them that we're mad. That's it. And somebody will say, okay, then what are we going to do? Get the government involved and take over Wall Street? Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Let's have the government run Wall Street. And, of course, that's what they want to do anyway. Wall Street runs the government. Government runs Wall Street. It's the same thing, folks. There's no difference between those two anymore. It's a
yeah, all it's going to be is more of what we've already seen. The big six mega banks will further use government to shut down their competition, just like we've seen in every other industry. It's incredible. And we've now gotten the list of demands from the group saying that they're the leaders of Occupy Wall Street, run by George Soros. It doesn't reflect the people actually in the street, but the mainstream media is running with the hoax, and it's universal health care, free education, $20 an hour even if you don't work. I mean, the recipe that they've put on the table would drive out whatever jobs are left and fully collapse the system. I mean, this is so amazing that they're giving the mega corporations exactly what they want, a tool to shut down everybody but them.
Right. Whatever's left of the free enterprise system, whatever little increment is left of true capitalism, they're out to destroy it completely. And, well, that's my point. I think the people out there who are justifiably angry about what they see is the responsibility of Wall Street having to do with our economic crisis. Now it comes to the question of what are we going to do about it? They haven't the foggiest idea what to do about it. They're just angry, and they're out there waving their placards, and that's good. But now come along the professionals, as you've so well described, the Soros army, and they're telling him now what the solution is, and as you said, and I've said, it's more of the same. So what do we do about that? We've got to reach those people in the streets. They're good people. They want to do what is right. They need education. They need history. They need leaders, true leaders, and I guess that's our role. We're doing our best.
Well, I would say we're having success because I've got reporters all over the country. Rob Jacobson right now is in New York, and he says the vast majority are Ron Paul supporters in the Fedders. They want to claw back the bailout money from Wall Street. They don't want the system to be Ponzi scheme controlled, but they're not getting any of the mainstream media attention. So the answer is continue to grow the alternative media, but also we're launching a movement to protest the Fed nationwide to point out that they're the real monopoly men. They're the people that got rid of Glass-Steagall, created derivatives. And that's why I'm calling on people to physically occupy the grounds around the main Dallas Fed. I'm going to be up there Friday, but I want folks to occupy it for weeks. I'm going to go to San Antonio and Houston Fed the days after, and then back to Dallas. I think this is going to be part of the shot heard around the world if we're able to really force the attention off of nebulous Wall Street and the free market as if it's the author of our woes and actually put it on the mega cartel. So we're about to end part one of this interview tonight. We're going to continue when the show ends, G. Edward, and tape part two that we're going to air Friday when I'm up in Dallas with solutions and a lot of other key research that you've engaged in. But right now, what do you think of my idea of occupying the Fed, A, and B, what is the end game of these people if we don't stand up to them and they get what they want?
Okay, I think your idea of focusing on the Fed is excellent, okay? But now we're still going to face that problem. A lot of people will go there and they'll say, end the Fed, end the Fed, end the Fed, wonderful. And then the question is, then what? End the Fed, replace it with what? A lot of those same people now are saying, well, we'll just turn it over to the Treasury. We won't complain about the fact that they're creating money out of nothing. We'll just focus on the fact that it's the Federal Reserve creating money out of nothing. And that's bad because those are big, bad bankers. But they say if we allow our nice, trustworthy politicians to create money out of nothing through the Treasury Department, that must be good. Well, you see, we haven't won yet. We still have to get people to understand it's not who creates fiat money, it's the fact that anybody is allowed to create fiat money.
We'll just trade out one group of masters for another.
We won't even trade them out. They're the same people. That's the point. The banks and the Treasury are where does the head of the Fed come from now? It comes from the banks, right? It's all intertwined. How long has it been since there's been anybody in the Federal Reserve System that didn't come from the banking industry?
Okay, in part two,
it's all the banking.
In part two, we're going to look at the structure of the Federal Reserve that you've written about and get into your solutions. But in closing, in a minute or two, what is the end game of the collectivists? From my research, it's the eugenics operation. It's this playing God situation. Spend a few minutes on the world we are going to live in, or our children are going to live in, if we don't defeat these people. I mean, how big are the stakes here?
Well, the stakes are total, and I think the best answer to that question, Alex, is what we've already said. It is their design to return the world to a universal serfdom, a feudalistic system with an elite in control. And the Federal Reserve plays an important part of that, but it's not the only part. I mean, the educational system plays an important part. Anything that can reduce the mental condition of humankind to the point of feeling totally lost, totally helpless, totally dependent upon the government to help them survive. That is part of the plan for people to accept total regulation over their lives and be grateful for it. The more crisis they can develop, the better it is, because that means the more grateful people will be for this supposed solution of being protected by an all-powerful Lord and Master.
That's why they want to poison us with the chemtrails, the sodium fluoride, all of it.
All of that, yes. Yeah, they need us to be grateful for what they want to do to us anyway. So, and the way they do that is they just keep crushing us down, creating crises, creating problems, economic disaster, wars, famine, you name it. And people will be so helpless and so frightened that they'll accept anything in the name of security.
Well, in part two, I want to discuss a great example of problem, reaction, solution, or crisis creation. And that, of course, is Operation Fast and Furious. Wow, that is really unfolding. As we end this Wednesday edition of InfoWars Nightly News, Edward Griffin, I want you to give out your websites and talk about some of the important work you're doing right now that is part of the solution before part two. But then I want you to add the caveat or the double addendum here, because we are at the end of the interview, on my view that, Pol Pot killed anybody who was educated or wearing glasses. They saw that as being upper class, to wipe out people that could challenge them. But the globalists with the fluoride and the drugs and everything, they're just trying to wipe out our minds and basically turn us into biological androids.
Well, yeah, you covered a lot of points there. First of all, thanks for the invitation to invite people to my websites. We have several websites, as you know. Our think tank website is called Freedom Force, and it's where we lay down strategies and explore strategies of how to take back control of our systems and how to educate and how to mobilize people on behalf of freedom. So that's freedomforceinternational.org. But our commercial site, where we sell books and recordings and videotapes and educational materials, is called The Reality Zone. And that's therealityzone.com. And you'll find about, well, a little over 100 different items there for sale, and we're constantly adding new items. So please come in there, and if you want to see what we think about news events, commentary on the news, we publish something every week, as you know, called Unfiltered News. We even put a few things in there now and then, Alex, from Prison Planet. And your excellent work gets in there quite a bit. So it's a free news service, and it's called Unfiltered News. Google it, and you can sign up there.
Wonderful.
Now, as for the other things, I don't know what to say. yes, they are trying to control our minds and our spirits, our bodies. So they want to control what medicines and foods we take into our bodies. They control what information we take into our minds. They want to create little robotoids out of us, and you know they're doing pretty well. When you go into town and you look at some of these people shopping at Kmart or wherever you see them, and you hear them talking, and they're talking about the most asinine, mundane things. And this occupies their lives. They have no idea of anything that's really important. They're all wrapped up with Dancing with the Stars or Saturday football or who knows what, you know. And these are all entertainment points with them. They need to be entertained and scintillated and tintillated. But
these are prisoners of the literal matrix, and we're here to break them out. G. Edwards, stay there. We're going to come right back to you in a moment, but I've got to end this Wednesday edition of InfoWars Nightly News. We're going to come back and tape the second half for Friday, okay?
Very good.
Thanks a million. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for this edition of InfoWars Nightly News. And as I said, we will be back on Friday with the second part of this interview that I'm about to shoot right now. Don't forget, we've got our Occupy the Fed event kicking off in Dallas, but it's happening all over the nation. Please be there. And if you can, be there with a sleeping bag and stay there, or come on Saturday or Sunday. And I'm going to be at other branches across the state in the next few days after that as well. This is so important. If you believe in the type of information you're seeing here and you want to help underwrite it and get it out to more people, we're not like Fox News and MSNBC that get secret banker bailout money or government propaganda funding. We are funded by viewers that want to help get this information out, and that's how we're building this news organization. So I want to thank subscribers to PrisonPlanet.tv and encourage people watching this on other areas of the web to become subscribers at PrisonPlanet.tv or InfoWarsNews.com. I'm Alex Jones signing off. Until tomorrow night, God bless you all. Joined by G. Edward Griffin. We're about to conduct part 2 of the interview that we aired part 1 of on Wednesday. Again, it is October 7th, 2011. While you're watching this news program, I'm actually in Dallas now, part of Occupy the Fed movement that we've launched so that the collectivists aren't able to demonize free market capitalism as the problem. We want to directly challenge the monopoly capitalists who are actually the enemies of the general public having property. They want a neo-feudalistic serf system. And we talked about that in part 1 of the interview posted at PrisonPlanet.tv and for the general public at the Alex Jones channel on YouTube. But now we're going to get into solutions with G. Edward Griffin, but I also want to get into problem, reaction, solution. So we're going to cover that first. G. Edward, Fast and Furious. Now we learn it's more like Iran-Contra. I covered it earlier on the Wednesday show, where it's admitted that the U.S. government allows drugs to be shipped in by select cartels, then actually ships them the guns. Doesn't just allow them to leave gun shops, and then gives it to cartels to wipe out their enemy, and then recycle the crisis and blame the Second Amendment for it. Now the Attorney General has been caught perjuring himself, but I noticed that Issa and others are saying, come in and change your testimony. We understand it was a mistake, because we've learned that Fast and Furious under another name is at least 5.5 years old and goes back to the Bush administration, allowing the Sinaloa cartel to bring in drugs in exchange for protection and guns to wipe out their enemies. And that is actually in Hawaiian papers, Texas papers, El Paso Times, but it's not getting national attention. I think this is one of the most red-handed examples of problem, reaction, solution I've ever seen. So your view on Fast and Furious and how important problem, reaction, solution has been in history.
Well, it's certainly been important, hasn't it, Alex, in our history in America, because for many years, actually long before the first Bush administration, there have been forces within the United States government who have wanted to have an excuse to change the character of the government and the character of life in the United States. This goes back actually to the turn of the last century. You may be familiar, we came across the testimony of Norman Dodd, who was the chief investigator of the tax-exempt foundations shortly after the end of World War II. And his testimony was absolutely stunning because he interviewed the heads of some of the largest tax-exempt foundations of the country at that time. And we're talking about the Carnegie Endowment Fund for International Peace. We're talking about the Ford Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundations and so forth, the big giants. And his testimony was startling because he found out that these foundations were deliberately spending huge amounts of money to create crises, to create conditions of chaos inside the United States as a stimulus to the American mind so that they would be willing to accept drastic changes in the way we live. Their goal, as expressed by, I think his name was Norman Gaither at the time, one of the big foundation heads, he said, Mr. Dodd, he said, well, our instructions are, our motive, our goal is to change life inside the United States so that it could be comfortably merged with the Soviet Union. Now, this was his exact words. And Dodd said that he almost fell off his chair when he heard that. He said, how in the heck can anybody in their right mind expect to change life in the United States so that it could be merged with the Soviet Union and by inference with all of the other nations of the world, especially of them, many of them being dictatorial in nature? That means that the United States would have to give up its cherished freedoms, its judicial system, its way of life, it's everything that we cherish, freedom of speech, our rights, and so forth. And the answer came was that they'll be glad to do that if it's seen by them as a means of protecting them against a dreaded enemy of some kind. And so the Carnegie Endowment Fund and all these other groups decided that they would do everything they could to manipulate the United States into war and to keep us in war for as long as possible, because under conditions of warfare, with a dreaded enemy always portrayed to us, we are, in fact, willing to give up all of those cherished things. Well, that was back in the 1940s that he discovered all of this, and now here it is 2011, and all of the things that Norman Dodd said, that'll never happen. They could never bring about those changes. It's already happened. What's the difference between life in the United States today at a deep level and all of the totalitarian systems of the world? There's so little difference anymore, and those differences are being whittled away as we speak. So it's actually come to pass, and as you say, its problem and its solution, we create a problem, then we offer a solution, and then we move, and that creates a problem in itself. We have another solution, and each little step along the way moves us closer and closer to the ultimate goal. Well, the ultimate goal, as I've said before, is to change life inside the United States so it can be comfortably merged with all of the nations of the world, regardless of their sociological, economic, or political characteristics, to bring about this new world order, as they like to describe it. This is the goal, and it's the kind of a new world order that I'm sure most Americans would not like if they fully could understand it and perceive what it is. So, yeah, it's a definite strategy. It's a tactic. It's not just happening by blind, random forces of history at all. It's been planned, and it's being executed in exactly that fashion.
It certainly is, and we've got to counter them. I mean, never before has it been more obvious how criminal these elites are, and that they're gaining monopoly control through government. And then they fund the opposition to call for more government, which is like throwing, the rabbit into the briar patch. Oh, please don't throw me in there. Looking forward into the future, I mean, I see a lot of hope because people really are waking up quick, those that can be reached. I mean, I really see kind of a dichotomy or a paradox where either people are getting more into the trance and deeply asleep, or they're getting more awake. So I see a clash coming. Well,
you certainly are correct on that. Excuse me for my phone ringing. I keep putting it on on hold, but it doesn't seem to stick.
Hey, it's
anyway.
real. It's real, G. Edward. We love it.
It's very real. My phone rings all the time here. I wish I could just unplug it. But anyway, where were we?
I was getting into the fact that there's a clash of
oh yeah, the clash, of course. Yeah, I think what we see is on the encouraging side, we see a rising tide of public awareness. And that's very encouraging. But we also see on the other side a rising tide of totalitarianism. And these forces are rising at the same time. And it's sort of nip and tuck to see which one is going to overpower the other. I believe that the answer to that question will definitely be known within our lifetime. Certainly your lifetime, probably mine. In other words, it's not too far away. It's coming to a head.
G. Edward, continuing along that line, the authoritarians, the collectivists, do know we're waking up to them. They admit that in their own Cass Sunstein White House memos. They're scared. They're concerned. And I think that's the most important message here, is that they're not all powerful. They can be beaten. They try to teach us that resistance is futile, like the corporate Borg in Star Trek. But every man, woman, and child, every religion, every race, every group out there needs to realize that every little thing they do towards liberty and freedom and waking others up and resisting adds together to defeat the collectivist. So it's like our free will, by doing little actions, adds to a liberty collective and an individual collective that they can't track or control, that isn't cookie cutter, that is going to defeat their Borg system.
Well, I agree with that. And also there's another element, Alex, and you've heard me talk about it a lot, and that is that knowledge by itself, and even sheer numbers by themselves, as important as they are not as important as what you do with that knowledge and what positions those numbers hold, the people that represent those numbers. What positions do they hold in society? In other words, do they have power? Are they running things? Are they leaders? Do people follow them and listen to them? Or are they just sort of rank and file? And so one of my big themes with the organization that we founded, called Freedom Force International, is to motivate people to network together so that they can help each other come into positions of leadership and influence in society. We call it coming to power. Coming to power is more important, well, it's certainly more important than just knowing what's going on. I mean, you can watch what's going on and complain, wring your hands and say, oh my goodness, this is terrible. I wonder how it's going to turn out.
Well, that's what the CFR, that's what the CFR is all about. As you know, British Intel set it up to take over the U.S. again in 1922, is they go out and recruit already prominent people and offer them more power to be part of this structure where they admit they're trying to create this continuity of agenda. And there's this idea that the establishment puts out that freedom fighters are supposed to live in a ditch, talk to people over a tin can, and have no power. No, it's the opposite. We have to build media organizations. We have to give to Ron Paul. We have to give to Freedom Force. We have to give our time, our energy, spreading the word. We have to be strong so that we have the armaments in the info war to meet this enemy. And we've got to run for office. And even if you don't win the first 3 or 4 times, you are educating people through that process and spurring others. And I think that's been my greatest contribution. I would say that's probably been your greatest contribution, is that you have educated whole new generations of people that understand what's happening. I've interviewed people who go out and protest the Fed. You know, one guy with a baby carriage with his child in it, and the cops came out and harassed him. The next time there were 200. Now there's thousands in New York showing up, and he's all over, you know, national TV now. I know I'm nothing special. I've experienced the power of the individual saying, I am not going to submit. And when you have the right information, the moral high ground, and you take action, and you attempt to build a structure or infiltrate their structure to destroy it, you're unstoppable. We can build liberty while sabotaging tyranny from within.
Well, I agree with that totally, Alex. And one of the things we're doing in Freedom Force International is that we're offering a free training program, and it's magnificent, on how to run for office and how to win. And we just started that about 4 months ago, and already we have people writing in and telling us we're following your plan, and we have won elective positions in our local communities. We're talking about running for the school board, running for city hall. One fellow's running for mayor. These are little things, but it's just the beginning. And this is how individuals can leverage themselves and actually begin to take back the power centers of society. But you have to get off of your couches. You have to go out on the streets. You have to go into the election polls. You have to go out there and campaign. You have to get away from the comfort zone that you live in and go out where the people are and offer your leadership. And that is beginning to happen. And this is the thing, if anything should scare the collectivists who have pretty much, they think they've got it locked down right now. If anything should scare them, I think it's that thing, that there are thousands or tens of thousands of little people coming up and saying, I'm just not going to sit here on the sidelines anymore. I'm going to reach for power, and I'm going to knock some of these guys off of their pedestals.
And in closing, very well said, something else happens. The tyrants, in many cases, will try to persecute good people for nothing. And that validates, wow, we've really got a tyranny. And other people around you will then see the tyranny and will join you. So a lot of us have to be martyrs in big ways and little ways. The tree of liberty has to be watered by the blood of patriots and tyrants. And it has to be watered with our sweat, our tears, our toil. And I can't think of anybody out there in the last 5 decades who's been toiling harder than you, G. Edward Griffin. God bless you, my friend, and thank you for spending so much time with us today.
Thank you, Alex, and I'm with you all the way.
We're all in this together. We'll all hang together or hang separate.